Good evening, Lisa here, and this is my first commentary for Vampire Reviews, which I've actually been meaning to do this since I had my 1 year anniversary last October, but I sort of, one thing led to another and I didn't really get around to it. But now I have the excuse. This episode, Interview with a Vampire, my very first episode, has passed 100,000 views on Blip, which is a really big deal for me, so yay! I know the only reason it passes 100,000 views on Blip is because after my last episode plays, it automatically plays, but still, I am celebrating because that is a big deal, and thank you all so much for watching my silly little show about vampires. And just want to talk a bit about how I got started and why I do the show, and all the little things that go into it, answer a bunch of questions that people have asked me over the past year and a half that I've been doing these videos. I can't believe it's been so long. It was a much longer process. First started working on this about 2 years ago, exactly. And, I actually started much sooner than that. In 2008 is when I first started working on That Guy with the Glasses with Lindsay, actually. And I can't believe it's been 4.5 years. This is our 5th year doing these videos. Wow. Oh, look at all that Twilight stuff. But I'll get to that in a minute. So 2008, I started helping Lindsay out with her videos for Nostalgia Chick, and then in 2011, I was taking a year off work, and I started helping her out a lot more with writing. We were doing the Dark Nella saga, and I was getting really involved and really into the whole writing scripts and filmmaking and internet video stuff and reviewing, critiquing, and she actually considered me a staff writer at that point with Nella, and we were doing a lot as a team. And she and us wanted to sort of broaden the team and chick thing into a big group thing. And Nella was actually interested in doing a show of her own too, which I think she'd still like to do. She just doesn't have the time. But I had an idea to do a show about comparing books to movies based off books, because I'm a big reader, I'm a writer, I like comparing things. But as I was developing that idea, I kept coming up with ideas for vampire books, and I started realizing all these books and movies that I want to compare to each other are all vampire books and movies. So why don't I just do a show on vampires? And, vampires are trendy, and there's a lot to say about them, and I obviously really like them. I've always been interested in the macabre, and not necessarily vampires, but when it comes to the macabre, if you're going to talk about just one thing, vampires are a good way to go. I kind of stole the idea for Vampire Reviews, or at least was inspired by a friend of mine who does Phantom Reviews, where he just reviews Phantom of the Opera movies, and, you should watch his show. But I like that idea of just having a very niche genre thing of where you just talk about one thing and you stick with that. Like, Nostalgia Chick supposedly just talks about girly movies from nostalgic era, but of course she doesn't. Obviously, Lindsay talks about whatever she wants to. But I really like sticking to a theme. And so that really appealed to me, and we decided, we being Team and Chick, that it would be best if I did it as a character, sort of red letter media style, and I guess like Lindsay's style too. She has a character, and a lot of people on That Guy with the Glasses do, just because you can get away with a bit more in the you critique because you love aspect if you have this heightened version of yourself. And yes, Maven is me if I were a super obsessed weirdo who snuck off into her room at night and dressed up like a vampire and talked about vampires all night, which I do, but not as a lifestyle thing, just as an internet video thing. It's the whole line between internet critic versus characters is a very blurry line, which I'm sure you're all aware of. But someone once described my character as she's dressing like she's going to a costume party where she was the only one who was invited, and I think that's the perfect description. And that's, that she's a loser who's obsessed with vampires and dresses in silly outfits, which she thinks are pretty and sexy. And yes, I think they're pretty and sexy to an extent, but I also think they're silly, and I, of course, wouldn't go out in public like that unless it was for a very themed event. But I own them for a reason. There's like this extension of my personality in this character that when I bring it to these discussions of literature and films based on literature, which I don't know if you've noticed, but most of the vampire films I've discussed so far, at least in the past year and a half, have all had literary tie-ins, which isn't my intention. It just sort of has worked out that way. And vampires come back to literature a lot anyway. But yeah, that was sort of the genesis of the character, and it took me a long time to come up with it. After I went to film Suburbanites in Chicago with everyone on That Guy with the Glasses, I met a lot of people there, and I made a lot of really good friends. It was an amazing experience, and I went there just to be a production assistant, but I wound up having a tiny part in the film, and it was great. And I got to be really good friends with Paul, as I'm sure you are aware, and as my friend, he was really encouraging, just saying, you know, I should get out there, I should do this project. I've been talking about this book versus movies thing, and then it turned to this vampires thing, and he actually helped me name the character, Maven. I wanted to do a parody of Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, so that's where Maven of the Eventide came from, and I like that had V's in it. I can like make the logo with V's into fangs, and so that's where that came from. And then Interview with the Vampire. Oh, Lestat, look at him. He's so broody. I think people think of Lestat most of the time as this like happy, flamboyant character, and they forget that he is so dark too, which I love to come back to. And Interview with the Vampire is my favorite thing ever, except for maybe Phantom of the Opera, but that's neither here nor there. But I wanted to start off the show with something that I really loved and knew a lot about and could talk about from a very educated point of view, but still also make fun of, in that, you know, you parody because you love kind of Mel Brooks sensibility. So Interview with the Vampire is perfect. You know, I've written fan fiction for this fandom, I role-play these characters, I have identified with them, and yet I also can look at them critically because, you know, make fun of them so much. But I also really do think this was a very influential movie, and a lot of people have this idea that, oh, vampires these days, Twilight's ruined them, and it's all, vampires are sappy and they aren't monsters anymore. But I think they forget that it really started with this film, and it wasn't bad when it started with this film, and if it's a bad thing now that vampires are sappy, it didn't used to be, and vampires can't be emotional and quote Shakespeare and be silly and it be a good thing, and we can actually like it without having shame. And yes, if you dress up like Lestat and use a Tide pen on your shirt, you're being a little silly, but you know, this movie was good for a reason. So that's why I started with Interview with the Vampire. And I know I've talked about Anne Rice a lot since then. And, you know, I love her books. I've got very mixed feelings on her writing and her as an author, which I could go into forever. But when it comes to the film version of this book, I can't say enough about it. And I could have talked about this for hours and hours, but I really want to keep this review 12 minutes or shorter, which was my goal. And it wound up being 16 minutes. And you may have noticed that most of my reviews verge on the 20-minute mark. I mean, my Queen of the Damned review is 26 minutes, longest review ever. But I try to keep them under 15 minutes, which is hard. And I haven't really succeeded just because there's something to be said for saying good things in as few words as possible and keeping your thoughts concise. So I really had to pick out just 4 points that I really wanted to make about this, and I could have made 100 points about this. So I picked my 4 essay thesis topics, as it were, and sort of wrote a paper as if I were writing it for a college essay. And oh, here comes Lindsay drinking my El Gato Negro. That was actually food color because we were out of wine because we had drank all the wine. I was originally going to have Nella in the skit too because I wanted to start off the show with this whole Team N-Chick thing, and I was going to have Nella come back and steal the wine, but she was not available. She's a very busy lady, which is why she isn't doing a show of her own yet. May happen, who knows. And I actually wanted to use her in other reviews that I've done since then and never really got the chance until the Vampire Wine review. She was supposed to be with me in another one. Oh, in the Blade review, and it wound up being Dan, and that's kind of how Dan got roped in, but it's not really about this video, so I'll get back to that another time. So like I said, it took me a while to really come up with the idea of the character and the nature of the show and the direction I wanted to go, and then to narrow down my thoughts on this film since it was such a big, important thing for me, and put it together. And I started really almost directly after Suburban Nights, so April 2 years ago, and thought about it and wrote it, and I got my script finished and filmed it in August, I believe. And then didn't get up till October because it just took me so long to really get it together. It's my first video. I wanted to make sure I did it really right, and I had the music right and the transitions right. And it was also my first time using Final Cut Pro, which Lindsay let me borrow her old MacBook with Final Cut Pro on it. And it was my first time editing a video like this. I'd actually only ever used Windows Movie Maker before, which was a big difference, and definitely a bit of a learning curve. But I tried to do my best, and I actually wound up editing most of it when Lindsay and I went on a road trip down to her parents' house, and then we went to Todd's house afterwards, and I was editing a lot of it at his place while we were hanging out. And, at the end where I used Sexy and I Know It, I kept playing it over and over again just to torture him, and that was a lot of fun. Torturing Todd is always fun. So they all helped me out with it. Lindsay set up the lights and the camera for me, and Todd was helping me with music choices, and then I would ask them for advice on editing and transitions, and Paul, of course, was a huge help. And then other people like Bennett gave me suggestions on how to make my transitions better, and other people would just watch my first draft and they came back with tips. And everyone on That Guy with the Glasses was so supportive when I put this out. It was a wonderful experience. And when I released this video, everyone retweeted it for me. And I had this goal. I wanted to get so many hits with this video for it being my very first video. Obviously, I wasn't expecting it to get a lot of attention. And I had this hit goal, and it exceeded it by more than double within 2 days. And I was just blown away that people actually wanted to watch me act like a silly obsessed weirdo, which, yes, I am a silly obsessed weirdo, but I usually don't act like it. Usually I hide it. And talk about vampires and fangirling and literature and metaphors and similes and art and stuff. And it was very encouraging, so I did more. And I wanted to really do one every other week. That was my goal. Because Lindsay was doing one Nostalgia Chick a week, and she was trying to do an alternate video, so she was doing 2 videos a week back then, 2 years ago. And she doesn't keep that schedule anymore, but it was going to be one vampire review for every 3 of her videos or something. But then I got a job. Like I said, I was taking a year off work, so I had all this time. But then I got a real job. Now I work a 9 to 5, so I'm lucky if I can get 1 video out a week, which I mean, 1 video out a month, which is good, because I think you have more than 1 vampire video a month and you kind of get over-vampired. Not that I could ever be over-vampired, but, most people could. And for a Team Nostalgia Chick thing on That Guy with the Glasses, I think 1 vampire video a month is enough. For Shay Apocalypse now, though, that we have this own website going, I'd love to do more in the vein of the macabre that doesn't necessarily have to do with vampires. So I might be branching out with my Maven character as a host to do other things than vampire reviews, but still, spooky, gothy stuff, which is my cup of tea. I'm not sure what yet, but that's the plan, though having a day job and a life and other sorts of things, and not being very good at editing videos and still being new to this, even after almost 2 years of working on this, it's hard work for me, editing videos. So my process is that, writing a script is the hardest part. But once I get that script written, I'll film, and that takes an evening, and I'll record my lines, and then it will be a week straight of taking my laptop on the subway to work editing on the train, from the moment I wake up on the train, from the moment I get off work on the train back home, and staying up till bedtime editing for about a week. And that, after a week straight of doing that, I just kind of want to breathe for a while. So then it's a week off, and then it's back to writing scripts. So 1 video a month is unfortunately all I can do in answer to the people who ask me why I don't do more. But I wish I could, though I think you probably would get sick of me talking about vampires more often than that. Though when I talk about the vampires, I usually really focus on these movies from a writing and character point of view, which I'm sure you've noticed before. I mean, I'm not a film student. I've never studied film other than as a layman. So most of my critique really comes back to the writing of these because I am a writer. My college degree is in theater and acting. So when it comes to character motivation and, you know, which builds these characters and why do they do the things you do as an actor, which is my, I wouldn't call it a forte, but it's some of my background. It's where I come into this. Oh, they're sexy and I know it. Oh, poor Todd. He was so miserable. It was great. I had so much fun. I think just coming back to this and saying how something with these characters could influence the future in such an impactful way that maybe you don't realize anymore because it's been almost 20 years since this movie came out, that someone's got to tell you, and it might as well be me. And what? Oh, credits already. All right, the stinger at the end, which Lindsay again helped me film. We just really want to establish this character and have it be like, yes, she exists in this universe with Lindsay, the nostalgia chick, in my old apartment, which I don't live in anymore since I moved in with Paul and Brentalfloss now, so that apartment is no more. But my set has improved since then. I love Lindsay's shirt. And I'm almost out of time, but I hope I answered a bunch of the questions that I get a lot. And if anyone has any more questions for me, please ask. I always respond on Twitter and stuff. And I still don't have a coffin yet, but I am saving my pennies. And after I buy that coffin, I will pay Lindsay rent. And then everyone will be happy. And I am very happy that this little video has reached 100,000 views on Blip. Thank you all so much. And I will see you another night.